The prison went silent the moment the doors opened. Every inmate on the tier froze as armed federal agents stepped inside the cell block. Their boots echoed against the concrete floor. Red lights flashed. Orders were shouted. And at the center of it all stood one man in handcuffs, his head lowered, his face pale. This man had just done the unthinkable. From inside this prison, he had helped destroy one of the largest crime networks in the United States. Drug bosses, corrupt guards, street gangs, money runners, even people outside the prison walls. They were all about to fall. But no one inside the prison knew how this had happened. No one knew when it started. And no one could believe who had done it, because the man being led away was not a guard. He was not a police officer. He was not a lawyer. He was an inmate. And now every person in that prison wanted him dead. As the agents pulled him toward the exit, one of the inmates shouted, "That's him. He's the rat." The word spread like fire. Snitch, informant, dead man walking. The agents rushed faster. The doors slammed shut behind them. And just before the final door closed, the man looked back once, his eyes full of fear, because he knew something the others did not. This was only the beginning. And if he survived the next few hours, the country would soon learn the truth. But to understand how one prisoner brought down an entire crime network, you have to go back to where it all started. Long before the raids. Long before the arrests. Back to the day he first walked into prison. His name was Michael Turner. Michael did not look like a criminal. He was not tall. He was not strong. He did not have tattoos or scars. He looked like a regular man you might pass in a grocery store and never notice. He grew up in a small town in Ohio. His parents worked hard. His life was simple. School, home, friends, dreams of a normal future. But one bad decision changed everything. Michael got involved with the wrong people. It started small, driving packages, making deliveries. He told himself he was not hurting anyone. He was wrong. One night, police stopped his car. Inside the trunk, they found drugs. A lot of them. Michael was arrested on the spot. In court, the judge showed no mercy. He was sentenced to federal prison. The moment the cell door closed behind him, Michael understood something very important. Prison was not about time. Prison was about survival. On his first day, an older inmate pulled him aside and whispered, "Keep your mouth shut. Watch everyone. Trust no one." Michael listened. He kept his head down. He followed the rules. He stayed quiet. But prison has a way of pulling people in, whether they want it or not. Michael noticed things. Which guards looked the other way. Which inmates controlled which areas. Who got special treatment. Who had cell phones. Who had drugs. It did not take long to realize that prison was not cut off from the outside world. It was connected. Very connected. Gangs inside the prison were running drug deals on the streets. Money flowed in and out. Orders were given from cells. Violence was planned behind bars and carried out outside. And the guards? Some were part of it. Michael tried to stay away from all of it, but trouble has a way of finding you. One day, an inmate named Carlos approached him. Carlos was respected, feared, protected. Carlos said, "You're smart. We need smart people." Michael tried to say no. Carlos smiled and said, "You don't get to say no." From that moment on, Michael was pulled into the system. He passed messages. He carried items. He watched deals happen. He saw things that made his stomach turn. Men beaten for small mistakes. Inmates punished for disobedience. Guards paid to stay silent. Michael lived in fear every day. Then something happened that changed everything. One night, Michael saw a guard unlock a cell and let an inmate out. Minutes later, screaming filled the block. Blood spilled onto the floor. The next morning, the prison called it a fight. Michael knew it was murder. That night, he could not sleep. He realized something terrifying. If he stayed quiet, he would become part of it forever. If he spoke up, he would die. Days later, he was called to the counselor's office. Waiting inside was someone he had never seen before. A man in a suit. The man introduced himself as a federal agent. He said, "Michael, we know what's happening in this prison." Michael's heart stopped. The agent said, We know you're not a leader. We know you didn't start this. But we also know you see everything." Michael said nothing. The agent leaned closer and said words that changed his life forever. "We want your help." Michael laughed nervously. "You've got the wrong guy." The agent shook his head. "No, you're exactly the right one." Michael stood up to leave. The agent said, "If you walk out that door, this crime network will keep growing. People will keep dying. And one day, you might be one of them." Michael sat back down. The agent explained the deal. Michael would secretly report what he saw. Names, times, locations, methods. In return, the government would protect him. Michael asked the question that mattered most. What happens if they find out? The agent was silent. That silence was the answer. Michael agreed. That night, he became an informant. And from that moment on, Michael lived two lives. By day, he was just another inmate. By night, he memorized everything. He watched who met with whom. He learned how drugs entered the prison. He saw how money was moved. He learned which guard were paid and how. Every detail mattered. Weeks passed, then months. The network was bigger than anyone imagined. It stretched across multiple prisons and several states. Michael passed information during quiet meetings with agents. Every meeting felt like a gamble with death. One wrong look, one suspicious guard, one mistake, and it would all be over. The pressure broke him slowly. He lost weight. He stopped sleeping. He jumped at every sound. But he kept going, because now there was no turning back. Then came the night everything almost fell apart. A lockdown was announced. Cells were searched. Guards moved differently. Whispers filled the air. Michael heard the words that froze his blood. "They're looking for a rat." Someone had talked. Someone had noticed patterns. Someone was close. That night, Michael lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to footsteps outside his cell. He knew one thing for sure. If they discovered the truth, he would not survive until morning. And as the lights went out, a shadow stopped in front of his cell. A key turned in the lock. The door began to open. The cell door opened slowly. Michael's heart slammed against his chest. So hard, he thought the sound might give him away. His hands were shaking. He sat up on his bunk, ready for whatever was coming next. A guard stood in the doorway. But not just any guard. It was Officer Reynolds. Reynolds was one of the guards everyone trusted. Calm, quiet, friendly. The kind of man who joked with inmates and called them by their first names. The kind of man no one would ever suspect. Reynolds looked inside the cell, then glanced down the tier. He stepped in and closed the door behind him. Michael swallowed hard. Reynolds said softly, "Relax. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be gone." Michael didn't answer. Reynolds leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "You've been busy, Michael." Those words felt like a knife. Michael's mind raced. Did he know? Did everyone know? Reynolds continued. "You've been paying attention, asking questions, watching people." Michael forced himself to speak. "That's how you survive in here." Reynolds smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're right, and some people don't like being watched." Michael felt cold all over. Reynolds stepped closer. "Carlos thinks there's a rat." Michael's chest tightened. "He thinks someone's talking to the outside," Reynolds said. "Someone small, quiet, someone people wouldn't notice." Michael said nothing. Reynolds studied him for a long moment, then said, "If you hear anything at all, you tell me." He opened the door and paused. Because whoever the rat is, he won't last long. The door slammed shut. Michael collapsed back onto his bunk, gasping for air. He didn't know if Reynolds suspected him or was protecting him, and that was the worst part. The next few days were a nightmare. The prison felt different. Eyes followed Michael everywhere. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. People whispered. He noticed Carlos watching him more closely now, asking questions that felt too sharp, smiling too much. Michael passed information to the agents anyway. He told them about Reynolds. He told them about the lockdown rumors. He told them the network was starting to panic. The agent listened carefully and said, "That means we're close." But close meant danger. Very real danger. One afternoon, Michael was sent to the laundry room. The moment he walked inside, the door slammed shut behind him. 3 inmates stepped forward. Carlos was one of them. Carlos smiled slowly. "We need to talk." Michael's legs felt weak. Carlos said, "You've been around a lot lately. You see things. You hear things." Michael shook his head. "I keep to myself." Carlos stepped closer. "Funny thing is, people who keep to themselves don't usually survive long." Michael's heart pounded. Another inmate cracked his knuckles. Carlos leaned in close. "If you're talking to someone, now is the time to stop." Michael forced himself to meet Carlos's eyes. "I'm just trying to do my time." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Carlos laughed. "Good answer." He stepped back and opened the door. "Get out of here." Michael walked away, his legs barely holding him up. That night, he met with the agents again. He told them everything. The agent looked serious. "Michael, they're narrowing it down. We need to move fast." The plan was already in motion. Multiple prisons, multiple cities, dozens of arrests. The agents were building cases so strong they could not fail. Michael was the key, but keys are fragile. The pressure became unbearable. Michael stopped eating. He barely slept. Every sound made him jump. Then came the mistake. One morning, Michael noticed something missing. His mattress had been moved, just slightly. Someone had searched his cell. Carefully, quietly. Michael felt sick. Later that day, Officer Reynolds pulled him aside. Reynolds said quietly, "They know." Michael froze. Reynolds continued, "Not everything, but enough." Michael whispered, "What do I do?" Reynolds looked torn. "You trust me?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. Reynolds said, "Then listen carefully. Tonight, something big is going to happen." Michael's stomach dropped. Reynolds lowered his voice. "Carlos plans to make an example." Michael felt dizzy. "Of who?" he asked. Reynolds didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Of you?" Michael's blood ran cold. That night, the prison went into lockdown. Lights flickered. Doors slammed. Inmates shouted. Michael sat on his bunk, shaking. He heard footsteps moving fast down the tier. Voices. Angry voices. Then screams. The sounds of fighting echoed through the block. Michael's cell door rattled violently. Someone was trying to break open. Metal clanged. Men shouted his name. The door bent inward. Michael backed into the corner, covering his head. Suddenly, alarms blared. Guards rushed in. Tear gas filled the air. Chaos exploded across the cell block. Michael was pulled from his cell by armed officers and dragged down the hallway. He coughed and choked, barely able to see. As they moved him, he saw Carlos on the ground, bleeding, screaming in rage. Carlos locked eyes with Michael and shouted, "You did this!" Michael was shoved into a holding room and locked inside. Hours passed. Then the door opened. Federal agents stood there. The same agent who first spoke to him said, "It's time." Michael said, "Time for what?" The agent answered, "Time for everything to come down." Michael was placed in protective custody. He was moved in secret. Outside the prison, arrests were happening everywhere. Homes were raided. Phones were seized. Money was frozen. The crime network was collapsing. But inside the prison, the fallout was just beginning. Because even though Michael was hidden, the word was spreading. The informant had a name now, and inmates across the system were demanding revenge. Michael lay awake in a new cell, alone, listening to distant shouting. He knew the truth. The network was falling, but his life was now worth less than ever. And the worst part was still coming, because soon he would have to testify, and everyone would finally know exactly who destroyed them.